Hi everyone, welcome to my review of Quentin Tarantino's The Hateful Eight in 2015. Here is the Blu-ray and of course the latest Tarantino film. Here we finally are here. It took a couple of days or probably actually took a couple of weeks. In between Django and this, and of course this is the latest Tarantino film that's out. And of course, Once We're Done in Hollywood is coming out this year, which I'm going to see, of course, really as soon as it comes out. And actually I'll announce it now. I'll be doing the ranking probably most likely once I've seen that film. I don't really want to do the ranking months before it and then include it, kind of when I do my review and say where it is, because that's kind of annoying. What I'll do is I'll do the ranking once I've seen that film and reviewed it, and then his final film apparently, I'll be, of course, a few years until that, and I'll do, kind of either an updated ranking or do the same sort of thing I was going to do. Whereas within the review, just kind of put, if it's 7th or 5th, whatever within the ranking. So yes, basically, this film, got it on Blu-ray here, of course, and yes, this is a film that a bit divisive when it came out. Some critics, the early reviews that were kind of released, basically said it could be one of his best. It's a masterpiece and all this kind of stuff, and absolutely, one of the best sort of westerns and all this kind of stuff. And then slowly, more reviews started to come out, and of course, the ratings went down. And yeah, basically, IMDb as well, much more lower than really most of his films. Apart from maybe Jackie Brown, Death Proof. And yes, this film, it's pretty divisive, but it has grown over the last couple of years in kind of regard. Again, still not one of his most popular films. And yes, basically, I was really hyped. Before seeing this film, when I seen I actually watched the trailer as well, and just kind of reading up on it, and kind of course, when I first heard that he was making another western, originally, of course, it's kind of meant to be a sequel to Django, but yes, another western, and it's set, of course, quite a few years after the Civil War, American Civil War, and of course, that he'd be using Ultra Panavision, 70mm, all this kind of stuff. I was hyped, and of course, anamorphic lenses. This is actually a very unique aspect ratio, which actually has not been used really up until this point. It wasn't used, kind of since the 50s and 60s on certain films. And yes, just really unique. And of course, yes, I thought I had kind of really high hopes, and I thought maybe it could be up there with Django and stuff. Then when the reviews came out, and I actually kind of saw one or two clips here and there and stuff, and I just kind of thought, I'm not going to go and see it at the cinema, actually. I didn't go and see it at the cinema, which is really, it's odd, yes, because Tarantino is one of my 10 favourite directors, but yeah, I just didn't see it, and I thought, I'll get it on Blu-ray, as well. I kind of double dip sometimes, and I always get it on the Blu-ray anyway, and I always find that the experiences nowadays are kind of better at home anyway, because people talk and everything in the cinemas, and yes, basically, I got it on Blu-ray, and I actually didn't watch it until April 2017. I was kind of putting it off and said I'll watch it, next month. Finally got around to it then, and this is the only time I've rewatched this today. We're now in 2019, so it's been nearly 2 years, really in between it. I didn't really remember much, I will say that, and I thought, the first time I saw it, I thought it was a great film. I thought, actually, it's not far off being a masterpiece, but I didn't think it was a masterpiece. I thought there were so many great things in it, and most of the film I loved, but there was a couple of moments throughout the film that I thought didn't quite work, went a bit too far, and also I didn't think it elevated to the level of masterpiece status. And yes, basically, I didn't remember much of it. When I'm rewatching it now, some bits come back to me. But yes, it was a great film. I thought just not, nowhere near for me as good as these other ones. And I was slightly disappointed at the time. I have to admit, I'm not going to lie, but I did think it was a great film. Some negative reviews out there, and I thought, I don't see why. It's a great film. Many people, of course, there are some people that don't like Tarantino's style, so this is kind of film more for them, because this is very in terms of style, certainly in the first half of the film, it's not really like Tarantino in the way he kind of shoots his films usually, and stuff, and even the dialogue is not quite there. In the way that the kind of other films are. The second half of the film is actually, especially rewatching it, much more kind of like Django in a way, more Tarantino, definitely, in its style, in kind of more close-ups and stuff, and the violence, and even the dialogue. the way it kind of is structured as well. This film is a very, very specific and unique Western. It's not Django, and it's not really. In some ways, it's not really like a traditional Western, but it is more so than Django. And I've heard about Rio Bravo, which I've not seen. It's kind of more like that. It's mostly one location, and it's about these bounty hunters. The main plot is basically, I'm not going to get into, but this is not a spoiler review. But it's bounty hunters, a hangman, his prisoner, a couple of other people who are also in this mini haberdashery. And yes, basically you've got the first half an hour, which is the stagecoach kind of thing. Involved with Samuel L. Jackson, Kurt Russell, and Jennifer Jason Leigh, their characters, there, and then they travel, and of course they arrive, in this kind of in the haberdasheries, and of course it's a blizzard, so they kind of all take shelter at night, and yes, the rest of the film pretty much is in this, this place, one location, and it kind of, at first it feels like a stage kind of play thing, and then it goes a bit more, like a kind of a Tarantino film in its structure, and of course with one location, like Reservoir in many ways, Reservoir Dogs, kind of as well with the violence and stuff, a bit like Django, and yes, basically, I couldn't really compare it to the other ones because it's not like that at all. Maybe you could say elements of Inglourious Bastards, certain scenes and sequences, but this film is very, very different. I would say it's the least Tarantino, certainly for the first half of the film. Even Jackie Brown is more Tarantino, even Death Proof, because that's kind of, you could say, a lesser extension of, kind of Kill Bill and stuff, although it's still a good film, very enjoyable, I liked it, I don't see the hate. But this film, it doesn't really compare in terms of style at first to any of these other films, you could say. The use of the cinematography especially is the difference here, because the dialogue and everything, you can say it's kind of a bit similar. The cinematography, of course, very, very wide screen kind of aspect ratio and different, very particular lenses that he uses, but also very, very, it's not got much close-ups, you could say, compared to his other work. It's very, very more long shots or medium shots, and there's not much kind of total shots in the film, and it's very, very gradual kind of movements, and just very, very subtle. The opening kind of shot as well is very, very different for Tarantino. And yes, just of course Morricone. Finally, Tarantino worked with Morricone on an original score. Now that is groundbreaking. That really is, because of course he is a massive fan of Morricone. So am I. He's my second favorite composer. So many people are, and of course he was using in pretty much all of his films some sort of Morricone music. As kind of existing pieces to use in his films. So much in his films, and yes, basically one of his idols he finally got to work with on the original score. And yes, it's not like his previous work, Morricone. I think over 30 years since he actually done a Western score, which is really, really weird. And yes, basically it's stunning, and it's more subtle, more kind of building, progressive. It is like The Thing, you could say, in terms of the way it builds and the very, very subtle nature of it, because of course Morricone worked on that film, a masterpiece, and yes, basically the music comes from that. It's reminiscent of that, and also of course the film itself actually reminds me of The Thing, very, very similar in many ways, of course, isolation, feel of it all, and yeah, of course, just many, many different similarities, but yes, Morricone, of course, and yeah, it's very, very different in that sense. It's got an original score, it's got a couple of songs in there as well, but it's not like, Pulp Fiction, Reservoir Dogs, or even Kill Bill and everything, in the way the music is used. It's a very, very different film, but yes, it does have, you say there's similar things, it really is the characters and the dialogue, you could say, to other Tarantino films. It plays more out like a kind of a stage kind of play at first, and of course, yes, you've got, in the cinemas, of course, there was intermissions, and there was actually a different release of this in many road shows. I've actually just got the 167-minute version on the Blu-ray, and yes, that's about 20 minutes shorter. I would like to see the one at some point, but yes, this version, doesn't have an intermission, but yeah, it's basically, it is a stunning film. It really is, and actually, I do now think, on this rewatch, my only rewatch that I've had, it's a masterpiece. No doubt, it's an absolute masterpiece. And actually, it's not, it's actually, kind of very, very close now for me to Jackie Brown, and actually, yes, it doesn't get into his kind of top, 5 or whatever, but really, it is a masterpiece, and I don't really think I have any flaws with it. So yes, you could say it's definitely grown on me on this rewatch. And my flaws mainly, the first time I saw it, was just a couple of scenes, really, and I'm not going to get into spoilers, but it was just the one scene which I actually thought was later on in the film, but actually it's not. It's kind of in the middle with Samuel Jackson. It's kind of like a flashback to kind of Bruce Dern, of course, in the film. And, to describe it without ruining it, it's to do with his son, and I thought it was a bit too far, that kind of flashback, and a bit over the top and kind of out of place. But this time, actually, I didn't really have a problem with it at all, and actually, it was pretty hilarious. So yes, that was one flaw, and I thought there was one other scene. I'm not really too sure why I thought that was a flaw, but really, it's just the fact that first time around, I didn't think it elevated to masterpiece level. I really do think it does now, and actually, I loved every single minute of this film. I think cinematography is stunning. Of course, this one, especially early on, as I say, it's more about what's within the frame and the kind of staging of it. The depth of field, the way that things are going on more within the frame than kind of as I say, there's less close-ups. There's less kind of there's less editing really, and of course, less shots in total. And it's more about kind of he plays around with different arrangements of things and stuff going on more in the foreground and the background. And it's just he plays around with that more and kind of creates this kind of like this interactive in many ways and kind of this kind of play. And of course, it is essentially at many points who done it. Of course, who is it that kind of I'm not going to get into spoilers, but basically yes, things go down and things develop and escalate, and of course it is a mystery film, and of course when they get in there and they soon realise that basically things something's happened, and someone, or at least one person is kind of responsible for something, and basically no one can be trusted. It's kind of it is a whodunit, and actually, like all great ones in this way, when you rewatch it, it's great to kind of see the different hints throughout and all this kind of stuff. And yes, Tarantino for me has created a masterpiece once again. It's just really is a stunning film. The characters, once again, absolutely brilliant. The way they're written, I think Jennifer Jason Leigh's character, is absolutely brilliant in the film. She kind of she's the prisoner, and she's the one who Kurt Russell has basically got in chains, and he's going to get her hanged in Red Rock, and basically, yes, she's kind of really disgusting character, but for me, she's one of the very best in the film. She's a really, really great character, and yes, performance is really something else. It's kind of an animalistic performance, hilarious as well. It's the thing about this film, it's really hilarious. It's kind of it's not as funny as Django and stuff, but it really it is one of the most funniest films, and just really is. It mixes comedy, it kind of works as a thriller in many different ways. Of course, a western, but not too much in the way that of course Django is, and this is very much in the one location for most of the film. But it is, it is kind of an homage as well to many different films. Not just westerns, but yes, this film really is absolutely stunning, and just the way this film escalates. You've got different characters in the film, that all kind of intertwines in many ways, and you're left kind of thinking, who is it that's kind of done these different things, and kind of when you rewatch it, you're looking for more clues and stuff, and it's just so much fun, and of course, the way this film is written is once again pretty much flawless. I think it's absolutely stunning. The dialogue, just the exposition with all of the characters within this kind of place. It's one location, because it's like a blizzard outside and everything. It's at night. You've got the fire and stuff. It's a very, very warm film, and just kind of talking about different things around the fire and stuff, or close to it, and just it starts off very, very peaceful, and more funny of course, and then it goes really, really insane, especially in the last sort of 30 minutes of the film, and just of course comes together wonderfully. I think the second half of this film is far better, you know, and actually it is resembles more of a Tarantino film here as well. And I just absolutely loved it. The final act is mind blowing. Of course, you've got one of the most disturbing moments involving. Yeah, it's basically something happens to a couple of people around the middle of the film or a bit after, and basically, yeah, it's one of the most disturbing Tarantino moments in his films, and of course, yes, it really kind of changes the film up, and from then on, it is just absolutely mind blowing, and it's just the perfect kind of subtle build up as well. This film is so good, you know, I'd highly recommend it. If you've not seen it, it has to be seen. Yes, it's not, you know, one of his very best or anything, but it is another masterpiece. And actually, you know, I think I was probably just kind of a bit disappointed that it wasn't, you know, right up there with the very best when I first saw it. And actually, you know, as well, a couple of things, you know, I kind of felt didn't quite work for me. And yes, that's why I didn't quite call it a masterpiece. It was, you know, say if I'd rounded it, it was kind of a 5-star film, I thought, you know, but it wasn't a masterpiece. It wasn't full marks. For now, you know, after this rewatch, it certainly is a masterpiece. Actually, one of his, you know, his only film that he hasn't made, sorry, that isn't a masterpiece is Death Proof, and I didn't expect that on the first watch, and it was still good, better than I thought it would be. But the rest of his films have been masterpieces. So what a track record. You know, I think this and Jackie Brown are actually pretty close for me now. I think this film, you know, I cared about, or at least was compelled by all these characters, the mystery of it all, the kind of the wonderful cinematography, you know, just the atmosphere through that, and the score, which is just very slow building, atmospheric, and kind of does have these kind of bigger moments in the score, but really it's very subtle, and just it's used to kind of you know, make the film flow more and kind of give it a kind of atmosphere and a kind of uneasy feel, you could say. And yes, just the cinematography is wonderful, even though it's not, of course, outside. It's not, you know, a really widescreen film that kind of is used to kind of show nature as much. There is early on and stuff, but it's not, you know, Lawrence of Arabia or something like that, where it's mostly always outside, and you know, you see these overwhelming kind of moments constantly. It is inside more, but still, the 70mm, you know, kind of uses of that is still warranted. I think it still achieves something masterful, and actually, he knew what he was doing with it. You know, he really did. Many people, of course, have criticised it, saying why did he bother doing that? But I think actually it worked wonderfully, of course, because you see most of the room at times, most of the characters and things going on in the background more as well, and I think he used that wonderfully. The kind of stagey feel that it has, but not in a bad way at all. And then it goes for more, you know, as the group kind of becomes less and less in numbers, you know, it becomes more and more like a Tarantino film, but also just more kind of close-ups and more contained in a way as well. More kind of, yes, Tarantino's style, and of course, yeah, it really just gets better and better, this film, you know, in the actual acts of the film, and just the exposition, the kind of the twists and turns, because of course it's more of a thriller than a western, you could say, and yes, it's just the unfolding of events. It's just so masterfully done. It really is a monumental film. Actually, I think it really is, and I think actually it's so much better than when I first watched it, and I don't really have any flaws with it now. So yes, of course, for me, this film gets 100%. I think it is an absolute masterpiece, and very, very close to Jackie Brown. There's a couple of things I prefer about Jackie Brown. But yeah, it stumped me actually on this rewatch. And yeah, I think most of the time, it's hard to do a ranking as well when you, not all the time, but sometimes when you've seen a film within it just once. You know, Death Proof, of course, it is my least favourite, that's not going to change. But you know, I've now seen all the Tarantinos at least 2 times, so you know, the ranking would be easier to do. I might have to rewatch Jackie Brown, actually, though, to kind of see what I prefer out of this and The Hateful Eight. And yes, basically, it's very, very close. I think both are masterpieces. Both aren't in the plus tiers, I think. To explain, you know, it just doesn't quite elevate to, you know, my plus tiers, these films, but really, they do elevate massively. They are masterpieces. You know, they don't really have any flaws. Just, yeah, not quite my top 200 films, either of them. But really, they're still my top 260 or 250 for sure at the moment. And yes, this film was so good. It's always gripping constantly. The use of flashbacks is great. The comedy in the film works every time. It really is a hilarious film. Of course, Samuel Jackson always adding comedy to pretty much every role he's in. Maybe not Unbreakable and stuff because that's more serious roles. But yes, this film is hilarious. The massive cast it has. Michael Madsen as well, Tim Roth. Wow, I love the kind of twist there as well. And just Tim Roth, of course, Michael Madsen, Samuel Jackson, Walton Goggins. He is brilliant in the film. One of my favourite characters. And of course, you've got so many other characters in the film that are just so good. Bruce Dern as well plays a great character. Really, really subtle there as well at first, and I just love the build up of the film. Love the mystery. I love all the twists, kind of payoffs. Channing Tatum as well is in the film. I loved all that. The stuff there. It's just such a good film. It's a masterpiece for me. It's kind of starts off very, very kind of showing how when they get to the cabin and stuff, haberdasheries. It's very, very isolated. You see the landscape shots early on and stuff, and of course, it's showing how kind of all the different through the use of cinematography, it kind of shows how kind of overwhelming it is, and how they're in this just in the middle of nowhere basically. It's kind of like a survival film as well. But when you get into that one location, it kind of feels more they're warmer inside, and it just adds so much kind of just really enjoyability to the film, and the fact they're in there and they have to kind of interact as well. It's just so much fun, and yes, the tension, the use of tension, all the different kind of, you could say, operatic sequences, although the music, of course, less kind of big and stuff, but it is really something else, this film. The use of actual songs as well, actually quite moving, really for this. And of course, the characters, the dialogue, and just of course, the actual ending act is absolutely mind-blowing. Really, really love this film now. It is, for me, a masterpiece, and as I say, very much on the level of Jackie Brown, and of course, they are my two least favourite masterpieces from Tarantino. But for me, he's only made one film that isn't a masterpiece, so that's pretty impressive. And of course, he's in my top 10 directors of all time, and that's not going to ever change. It's a shame if he does just make 2 more films, of course, including Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. But I think it's kind of a win-win. If he does make just 2 more films, he's got, obviously, of course, an amazing career. But if he does make more, there's chances that he'll make more great films. And of course, I don't have any doubts that he could. It would be a real shame to lose Tarantino, because he really is so inspirational. But for me, this is a masterpiece, and what I'll do, of course, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I will be kind of watching that and then doing the ranking. So yes, can't wait for that. And yes, of course, thanks for watching my review.